maybe wealth isn't for me. Maybe I'm just not good with money. Maybe this is just how life is. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you stuck? What if the real difference between those who struggle financially and those who build lasting wealth has nothing to do with luck, background, or even intelligence, but everything to do with how they think? Because money doesn't respond to effort alone, it responds to behavior, and behavior is driven by mindset. In this audiobook, Change How You Think, Change Your Money, Wealth Psychology, Millionaire Mindset, you're going to step into a completely different way of seeing wealth, decisions, risk, and yourself. Not surface-level tips, not quick hacks, but deep internal shifts. The kind that change how you act when nobody is watching. The kind that change how you decide when pressure hits. The kind that quietly, consistently reshape your financial reality. We're going to walk through 25 chapters, each one focused on a core psychological principle behind wealth. You'll learn why most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. Why discipline beats motivation every single time. Why your relationship with money matters more than your income. Why patience is the highest paid skill in the world. And why the real game isn't about making money. It's about becoming the person who keeps it. This is not financial advice. This is psychological transformation. Because once your thinking changes, your decisions change. Once your decisions change, your life follows. Here's the truth most people never hear. Wealth is not something you chase. It's something you align with. And right now, you're about to start that alignment. But before we go deeper, I want you to do something simple. Make a quiet agreement with yourself that for the next few hours, you will listen not just to understand, but to change. And if at any point something hits you, something real, something uncomfortable, something that feels like truth, don't ignore it. That's where your growth is hiding. And if this journey resonates with you, if one line shifts your perspective even slightly, let that be your signal to commit deeper, because this isn't just an audiobook. It's a mirror, and what you see in it might change everything. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. No one is crazy, they're conditioned. Have you ever looked at someone's financial decision and thought, how could they possibly do that? Why would someone spend money they don't have, invest in something risky, sell everything in panic, or hold on to something that's clearly not working? From the outside, it looks irrational, even reckless. But here's the truth. Nobody is crazy. They're conditioned. Every financial decision a person makes is shaped by their experiences, their upbringing, their environment, their fears, their wins, their losses, and most importantly, the stories they've been telling themselves for years. You don't see the full picture, you only see the outcome. A person who grew up watching their parents struggle might hoard money, afraid to lose it. Another person raised in abundance might take risks easily because they've never experienced real loss. Someone who got lucky once might believe they're skilled. Someone who failed once might believe they're incapable. Same world, different realities. That's why two people can look at the same opportunity and make completely opposite decisions. Not because one is smarter, but because they're wired differently. And this is where it becomes dangerous. Because if you don't question your conditioning, you will repeat it automatically, unconsciously, over and over again. Think about your own beliefs about money. Where did they come from? Were you taught that money is hard to earn? That rich people are greedy? that saving is more important than investing, that risk is dangerous, or maybe that money equals success, that more is always better, that status matters, that appearances define worth. None of these beliefs are neutral. They shape your behavior quietly, constantly. And the most dangerous part, they feel like truth, not opinions, not perspectives. Truth. That's why people defend their financial habits so strongly, because they're not just defending actions, they're defending identity. But if you want to build wealth, you have to separate truth from conditioning. You have to ask yourself, is this belief helping me or limiting me? Because the market doesn't care about your past. Money doesn't care about your story. Outcomes don't respond to excuses. They respond to behavior, and behavior comes from mindset. This is why two people can earn the same income and end up in completely different financial positions. One builds assets, the other builds expenses. One delays gratification, the other chases it. One thinks long-term, the other reacts short-term. Same money, different psychology, and that's the game you're in, not a numbers game, a thinking game. So the question becomes, are you thinking in a way that builds wealth or in a way that slowly destroys it? Because if you don't take control of your thinking, your past will do it for you, and it will keep you exactly where you are, without asking for permission. But here's the good news. Conditioning is not permanent. It can be rewritten. It can be challenged. It can be replaced, but only if you're willing to see it first. And most people never do. They stay trapped in patterns they don't even realize exist. They blame circumstances. They blame timing. They blame luck. But they never question the one thing that drives it all, their thinking. And until that changes, nothing else will. So right now, I want you to pause and ask yourself honestly, what do I actually believe about money? Not what sounds good, not what you've heard, but what you truly believe, because that belief is quietly shaping your entire financial life. And in the next chapter, you're going to discover something even deeper, something that explains why even smart people make bad financial decisions, and why success is never as simple as it looks. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. Luck, Risk, and the Illusion of Control. There's a quiet lie that most people believe, that success is always earned and failure is always deserved. It sounds fair, it sounds logical, it feels right, but it's not true, because in the world of money, luck and risk are always present, whether you acknowledge them or not. Two people can make the exact same decision, with the exact same information, at the exact same time, and end up with completely different outcomes. One wins, one loses. Was one smarter or just luckier? This is where most people get confused. They look at results and assume they understand the cause. They see someone successful and think they must know what they're doing. They see someone struggling and think they made bad choices. But reality is more complex, because outcomes are a mix of skill and chance. And when you ignore that, you start building dangerous beliefs. You start overestimating your control and underestimating uncertainty. Let's break this down. Imagine someone invests in a business. They research, they plan, they take calculated risk, and it fails. Was it a bad decision? Maybe. But maybe not. Maybe the market shifted. Maybe timing was off. Maybe something unpredictable happened. Now imagine someone else makes a careless investment. No research, no strategy, just impulse. And it works. They profit. They win. Was it a good decision? Not necessarily. But here's the problem. We judge decisions by outcomes, not by process. And that distorts everything. Because when people get lucky, they think they're skilled. And when they get unlucky, they think they're incapable. This creates two dangerous mindsets: overconfidence and fear. Overconfidence makes you take reckless risks. Fear makes you avoid necessary ones, and both destroy long-term wealth. The wealthy think differently. They don't chase perfect outcomes. They focus on good decisions, repeated consistently, over time. Because they understand something most people don't. You can do everything right and still lose, and you can do everything wrong and still win. But in the long run, good decisions compound and bad ones catch up. This is where discipline becomes more important than emotion, because emotions react to outcomes, but discipline follows process, and process is what builds wealth. Now think about your own life. How many times have you judged yourself too harshly for something that didn't work out? How many times have you taken credit for something that was partly luck? If you don't separate these, you will either doubt yourself too much or trust yourself too blindly. Both are dangerous because wealth requires balance, confidence with humility, action with awareness, risk with understanding, and most importantly, patience. Because when you understand the role of luck, you stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop feeling behind because you realize everyone is playing a slightly different game with different variables, different starting points, different timing. And instead of focusing on outcomes, you start focusing on consistency. This is where real power begins, not in trying to control everything, but in controlling what you can, your behavior, your decisions, your mindset, and letting time handle the rest. Here's a line I want you to remember. Success is not about winning every time. It's about surviving long enough to win. Because in the world of money, survival is everything. Avoiding big losses, avoiding emotional decisions, avoiding unnecessary risk. That's what keeps you in the game. And staying in the game is what gives you a chance to grow. But most people don't think this way. They want fast wins, quick returns, immediate results. And that mindset leads to the next trap. A trap that keeps people working harder, but getting nowhere. In the next chapter, we're going to break that illusion and uncover why having enough might be the most powerful financial advantage you can ever have. Chapter 3. The dangerous myth of more. There's a belief that quietly controls most people's financial lives. If I just had more, everything would be better. More money, more income, more opportunities, more success. And on the surface, it sounds reasonable. Of course, more would help, right? But here's the truth most people don't realize. More doesn't solve the problem. More often magnifies it. Because money doesn't fix your habits. It exposes them. If you can't manage a little, you won't manage a lot. If you feel anxious with what you have, you'll feel anxious with more. If you chase validation now, you'll chase it at a higher price later. This is why you see people earning 6 figures, still living paycheck to paycheck. Why lottery winners go broke. Why celebrities lose fortunes. It's not a money issue, It's a mindset issue because without the right thinking, more becomes a trap. You start raising your lifestyle faster than your income. You start comparing yourself to higher standards. You start needing more just to feel the same. And suddenly, enough never arrives. Let me ask you something. How much is enough for you? Not in numbers, but in feeling. When will you say, I have enough. I am okay. I can breathe. Most people never answer that question, and that's why they stay stuck. Because if you don't define enough, you will chase more forever. And chasing forever is a race you can't win. The wealthy don't just focus on earning more. They focus on needing less, not out of scarcity, but out of control. Because control creates freedom. When your needs are low, your options are high. You can walk away from bad opportunities. You can wait for better ones. You can invest instead of consume. You can think long term. But when your needs are high, your freedom disappears. You become dependent on income, on approval, on constant growth just to maintain your lifestyle. That's not wealth. That's pressure. Real wealth is not what you earn. It's what you keep. And more importantly, what you don't need. This is why some of the happiest, most financially stable people don't look rich, because they've mastered something deeper, contentment, not complacency, not lack of ambition, but clarity. They know what matters. They know what doesn't. And they don't waste energy chasing things that don't add value. This is a psychological advantage. Because when you're not desperate for more, you make better decisions. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't overextend, you operate from strength, not need, and that changes everything. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't aim higher. It doesn't mean you shouldn't grow. It means your growth should be intentional, not emotional, driven by purpose, not pressure. Because when more is driven by insecurity, it never satisfies. But when it's driven by vision, it builds something meaningful. Here's the shift. Stop asking, how can I earn more? And start asking, what is enough for me to live well and build wisely? Because once you define that, everything becomes clearer. Your spending, your saving, your investing, your priorities, and most importantly, your peace of mind. This is where wealth begins, not in your bank account, but in your perspective. Because a person who knows enough is already ahead of someone chasing more blindly. And in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something even more powerful. A force that quietly shapes every financial decision you make, without you even realizing it, your ego, and how it might be costing you more than money. Chapter 4. Ego is expensive, and most people don't even realize how much they're paying for it. Not in cash, not directly, but in decisions, in missed opportunities, in silent self-sabotage. Ego doesn't show up loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It justifies. It convinces you that you're right even when you're not. And when it comes to money, that can cost you everything. Let's be honest for a moment. How many financial decisions have you made not because they were smart, but because they felt right? Because they protected your image? Because they avoided embarrassment? Because they proved something to someone else? That's ego. Buying something you can't afford just to look successful. Holding on to a failing investment because you don't want to admit you were wrong. Refusing advice because you think you already know enough. Working harder to impress instead of working smarter to build. These decisions don't feel like mistakes in the moment. They feel justified, logical, even necessary. But over time, they create cracks, and those cracks become patterns, and those patterns quietly drain your wealth. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Ego cares about perception. Wealth cares about reality. And when those two conflict, most people choose perception because it feels safer, it feels better, but it's an illusion. Because the world doesn't reward how things look, it rewards what actually works. The wealthy understand this deeply. They are not obsessed with being right. They are obsessed with being effective. They don't need to win every argument. They don't need to prove their intelligence. They don't need validation for every move. They focus on results, quietly, consistently, and when they're wrong, they adjust, fast, without drama, without ego, because they understand something powerful. Being wrong is expensive, but staying wrong is devastating. Now think about that. How long have you held on to something just because you didn't want to admit it wasn't working? A job, an investment, a habit, a belief? How much has that cost you? Time, energy, money, peace. Ego delays correction, and delay multiplies loss. This is why humility is one of the most valuable traits in wealth building. Not weakness, not insecurity, but clarity. The ability to say, I got this wrong, and move forward without attaching your identity to the mistake, because your decisions are not who you are. They're just choices, and choices can change. But ego makes you defend them, protect them, repeat them, and that's where the damage happens. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Ego doesn't just affect your mistakes, it affects your growth. Because if you think you already know enough, you stop learning. If you think you're already ahead, you stop improving. If you think you don't need help, you stay limited. And in today's world, where information moves fast, where markets evolve, where opportunities shift constantly, staying still is falling behind. The people who grow are the ones who stay open, curious, willing to be wrong, willing to adapt. That's how you stay relevant. That's how you stay sharp. That's how you build something that lasts. Now let me give you a simple shift. Instead of asking, how do I look? Start asking, what works? Instead of thinking, I need to prove myself, start thinking, I need to improve myself. Because one drains you, the other builds you. And here's a line I want you to remember. Your ego will spend your money. Your discipline will multiply it. One seeks validation, the other builds value. And you can't follow both at the same time. So the question is, which one are you listening to? Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something even more subtle, something that feels productive, but often leads people in the wrong direction. The illusion of being busy without actually building wealth. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 5. Busy is not productive, and productive is not always profitable. That distinction changes everything. Because most people don't lack effort. They lack direction. They wake up early. They stay active. They fill their days with tasks, meetings, notifications, responsibilities. They feel exhausted by the end of the day, but strangely, not fulfilled, not ahead, not closer to financial freedom, just tired. And here's why. Because being busy gives the illusion of progress. But illusion is not growth. Let me say that again. Activity is not achievement. You can move all day and still go nowhere. And in today's world, It's easier than ever to fall into that trap. Endless emails, constant updates, scrolling that feels like research, work that feels urgent, but isn't important. It creates a feeling of momentum. But underneath it, there's no real movement, no leverage, no long-term value being built, and that's where most people stay stuck, because they confuse effort with impact. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Wealth is not built by doing more. It's built by doing what matters most, consistently, over time. The wealthy don't chase every opportunity. They don't fill every hour. They don't react to every demand. They focus deeply on high-impact actions, actions that create leverage, actions that multiply results, actions that continue working even when they stop. Think about that. There are two types of effort, linear effort and leveraged effort. Linear effort pays once. You work, you get paid, you stop, the income stops. That's the model most people live in. But leveraged effort pays repeatedly. You build something once, and it continues to produce an investment, a skill, a system, a business, a network, something that compounds. And this is where mindset matters again. Because if your thinking is focused on staying busy, you'll always default to linear effort. It feels safe, it feels familiar, it gives immediate feedback, but it limits your growth. Because there's no scaling, no expansion, no freedom. Now, I want you to reflect honestly. How much of your day is spent on things that actually move your life forward? Not things that feel productive, not things that keep you occupied, but things that truly build something. If the answer is unclear, that's the problem, because clarity is power, and without clarity, you default to noise. This is why wealthy thinkers ask different questions. Not, what do I need to do today, but what matters most today? Not, how can I stay busy, but how can I create impact? Not, how do I make money now, but how do I build something that keeps making money later? That shift changes everything, because now you're not just working, you're building. And building requires patience, focus, and often doing less, but doing it better. Now here's where most people struggle. Slowing down feels uncomfortable because we're conditioned to equate speed with success. More tasks, more output, more hustle. But real growth doesn't always look fast. Sometimes it looks like thinking, planning, saying no, waiting, and trusting the process. That's difficult because it requires discipline. It requires confidence. It requires resisting the urge to feel busy, just to feel valuable. But here's the truth. You are not paid for how busy you are. You are paid for how valuable your actions are. And value doesn't come from noise, it comes from focus. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't ask, how do I do more? Ask, what can I eliminate? Because what you remove is just as important as what you add. Now this leads us to something deeper, because even when people know what matters, even when they understand leverage, even when they want to focus, they still struggle to follow through. Why? Because knowing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. There's something else required, something that separates intention from action. In the next chapter, we're going to confront it directly. Discipline, not the kind that sounds good, but the kind that changes your life. Chapter 6. Discipline is the bridge between knowing and becoming. Most people don't fail because they lack information. They fail because they lack consistency. They know they should save. They know they should invest. They know they should avoid unnecessary spending. They know they should focus on long-term growth. They know. But they don't do. Not consistently. Not when it matters. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most financial lives fall apart. Because knowledge without action is just potential. And potential doesn't pay bills. Potential doesn't build wealth. Potential doesn't change your life. Only action does. Repeated action, disciplined action. And here's the part most people avoid. Discipline is not about feeling ready. It's about acting when you're not. Because if you wait for motivation, you'll keep waiting. Motivation is unpredictable. It comes and goes. It depends on mood, energy, environment. But discipline is a decision, a standard, a commitment you keep, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Think about this. How many times have you said, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll save when I earn more. I'll invest when I feel confident. I'll focus when things calm down"? And how many times did tomorrow look exactly like today? That's not a lack of knowledge. That's a lack of discipline. And discipline doesn't mean perfection. It means consistency. Showing up again and again and again, even when it's boring, even when it's slow, even when nobody sees it, because that's where real change happens. Not in big moments, but in small, repeated actions. This is something your competitors hint at in their material, the idea that discipline must override comfort. But most people still underestimate how brutally consistent it needs to be. Now let's connect this to money. Building wealth is not about one big decision. It's about thousands of small ones. Choosing to save instead of spend, choosing to invest instead of consume, choosing to learn instead of distract, choosing to wait instead of rush. And each choice feels small in the moment, almost insignificant. But over time, they compound. And that's where discipline becomes powerful, because it turns small actions into massive outcomes. Now here's the challenge. Discipline doesn't feel rewarding at first. It feels restrictive. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're missing out, because you're going against your impulses, against your habits, against your conditioning. But that discomfort is a signal that you're growing, because comfort keeps you the same. Discomfort moves you forward, and the people who build wealth learn to sit in that discomfort without reacting, without quitting, without negotiating. They don't argue with their goals. They don't debate with their future. They decide, and they follow through. That's it. Simple, not easy, but simple. Now imagine this. What would your financial life look like if you were disciplined for 1 year? Not perfect, just consistent. Saving regularly, learning daily, making intentional decisions, avoiding impulsive actions. Staying focused. 1 year, that's it. You wouldn't recognize your life, because discipline creates momentum, and momentum creates confidence, and confidence makes everything easier, but it starts small. One decision, one action, one moment where you choose what you know is right over what feels easy. That's the moment that matters. Not the big ones, the quiet ones, the ones nobody sees. That's where your future is built. Now, here's a line I want you to remember. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And if you keep choosing what you want now, you will never reach what you want most. So the question becomes, what are you choosing today? Because in the next chapter, we're going to take this even deeper into something that quietly controls your discipline, your decisions, and your financial future. your relationship with time, and why understanding it might be the most important shift you ever make. Chapter 7. Time is the real currency, not money, not status, not even opportunity. Time. And most people spend it like it's unlimited. They waste hours without noticing. They delay decisions without urgency. They trade their future for comfort again and again without realizing what they're losing. Because here's the truth most people ignore. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. And once you understand that, everything changes. Your priorities shift. Your decisions sharpen. Your tolerance for distractions disappears. Because now you see clearly. Every hour is a trade. Every choice is an exchange. You are constantly deciding what your life is worth. Now think about how most people treat time. They spend it reacting, scrolling, waiting, avoiding. They say things like, "I'll start later. I have time. I'll figure it out eventually." But eventually is a dangerous word because it creates the illusion of control without any commitment. And while you're waiting, time is moving silently, relentlessly, without asking, without slowing down. And the cost is invisible at first, but over time, it becomes everything. Missed opportunities, delayed growth, lost momentum, regret. This is why wealthy thinkers treat time differently. They don't just manage money. They manage attention, energy, focus, because they understand money follows value, and value is created through time, used intentionally. Now here's where it gets deeper. Not all time is equal. An hour spent distracted is not the same as an hour spent focused. An hour spent reacting is not the same as an hour spent building. An hour spent consuming is not the same as an hour spent creating. And yet, most people treat all hours the same. They don't protect their best time. They don't prioritize deep work. They don't create space to think. They fill every gap with noise. And that's where they lose. Not because they lack time, but because they misuse it. Now imagine this. If you took just 1 hour a day and used it intentionally, focused, undistracted, committed to growth, what would happen? This idea shows up again and again in successful frameworks. The concept that even one focused hour can shift your entire trajectory if used with intention. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently. Over weeks, months, years, that hour compounds. Just like money, just like habits, just like decisions. And suddenly, you're not the same person because you used your time differently. That's the shift. From passive time to intentional time. From drifting to directing. From reacting to building. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Using time well requires sacrifice. You can't do everything. You can't say yes to every distraction. You can't keep every habit. You have to choose, and choosing means letting go of comfort, of convenience, of short-term pleasure for long-term gain. That's not easy, but it's necessary because time doesn't reward intention. It rewards action, and action requires clarity. So let me ask you something directly. Where is your time going? Not where you think it's going, not where you want it to go, but where it's actually going, because your time is a mirror. It reflects your priorities, your discipline, your truth. And if you don't like what you see, you don't need more time. You need better decisions. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Your future is built in hours you don't waste. Not in years, not in big moments, in hours, quiet, focused, intentional hours. That's where everything changes. And the people who understand this move differently, think differently, live differently. They don't rush, but they don't delay. They don't panic, but they don't drift. They respect time, and time rewards them. Now this leads us to something even more powerful, because even if you manage your time well, even if you stay disciplined, even if you think long term, there's still something that can break everything, something emotional, something unpredictable, something that makes people abandon everything they know in a single moment, fear. And in the next chapter, we're going to face it directly, because if you don't understand fear, it will control your money, your decisions, and your future. Chapter 8. Fear is the silent decision maker. It doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't tell you, I'm about to control your life. It whispers. It disguises itself as logic, as caution, as being realistic. And before you realize it, you've made a decision, not based on opportunity, but based on fear. Fear of losing money, fear of making the wrong move, fear of looking stupid, fear of failing, fear of starting, fear of trying again. And here's the problem. Fear doesn't just stop bad decisions. It stops all decisions. And in the world of wealth, indecision is one of the most expensive habits you can have. Because while you hesitate, time moves, opportunities pass, growth slows, momentum disappears, and nothing changes. Now let's be clear. Fear is not the enemy. It's natural, it's human, it's necessary. It exists to protect you. But here's where most people get stuck. They treat fear as a signal to stop. Instead of a signal to think, they feel fear and immediately pull back, avoid, delay, wait. But what if fear is not telling you to stop? What if it's telling you to pay attention? Because fear often shows up in moments of growth, moments where something matters, moments where your future is being shaped. And if you always retreat, you stay where you are, safe but stuck. Now let's connect this to money. How many times have you avoided learning about investing because it felt complicated? How many times have you delayed starting something because you didn't feel ready? How many times have you stayed in a situation because it felt secure, even though it wasn't growing you? That's fear, not protecting you, but limiting you. And the longer you listen to it blindly, the stronger it becomes. Because every time you avoid something, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. And that belief becomes your reality. But here's the shift. Fear doesn't disappear when you're ready. It disappears when you act. Not recklessly, not blindly, but intentionally. Because action creates evidence. Evidence that you can handle more than you think. Evidence that uncertainty is survivable. Evidence that growth is possible. And once you have that evidence, fear loses its power. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore risk. It means you understand it, you respect it, you prepare for it, but you don't let it paralyze you, because paralysis is where potential dies. The wealthy don't avoid fear. They move through it, carefully, strategically, but consistently. They understand that every opportunity carries risk, but so does staying the same. And often, the biggest risk is doing nothing. Now think about that. Doing nothing feels safe, but over time, it creates the biggest loss. Lost time, lost growth, lost potential. Because while you're avoiding risk, you're also avoiding opportunity. And opportunity is what builds wealth. This is why mindset matters again. Because if your thinking is driven by fear, you will always choose safety over growth, comfort over progress, short-term relief over long-term gain. But if your thinking is driven by awareness, you start asking better questions. What's the real risk here? What's the potential upside? What can I control? What can I learn? And that changes your response from emotional to intentional. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Fear will keep you safe, but it will never make you rich, because wealth requires movement. It requires decisions. It requires stepping into uncertainty again and again, not recklessly, but courageously. Now, here's something powerful. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's action despite it. And every time you act despite fear, you grow, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, personally. You become someone who can handle more. And that identity is what creates wealth, because money follows behavior, and behavior follows identity. So if you want different results, you need a different relationship with fear, not eliminating it, but understanding it, working with it, moving through it. Because on the other side of fear is everything you've been avoiding, and often everything you've been wanting. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more subtle, something that feels harmless, but it quietly shapes your financial future every single day, your habits, and how the smallest ones create the biggest outcomes. Dear viewer, we would really be grateful if you could share your ideas on how we can improve our videos in the comments. Thank you very much. Chapter 9. Small habits, massive consequences. Most people are waiting for a breakthrough, a big moment, a sudden change, something dramatic that flips everything overnight. But that's not how wealth is built. It's not one decision, it's thousands. And most of them feel small, almost invisible. Choosing what to buy, choosing what to ignore, choosing what to focus on, choosing what to repeat every single day. And here's the truth most people overlook. Your financial life is not shaped by big moments. It's shaped by daily habits. Because habits don't feel powerful in the moment. They feel ordinary, routine, automatic. But that's exactly why they matter. Because what you repeat becomes who you are. And who you are determines what you do with money. Now think about your daily habits, not the ones you talk about, the ones you actually live. Do you check your finances regularly or avoid them? Do you think before you spend or react emotionally? Do you invest consistently or only when it feels right? Do you learn about money or assume you already know enough? These habits seem small, but over time, they compound just like interest, just like time, just like decisions. And the direction they take you depends entirely on what you repeat. This idea shows up in many successful frameworks, the understanding that consistency in small actions builds long-term results, even when progress feels invisible at first. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Habits are not just actions. They are reflections of identity. You don't just spend impulsively. You believe something that justifies it. You don't just avoid investing. You believe something that holds you back. You don't just procrastinate. You believe something that makes delay feel safe. So if you want to change your financial habits, you don't just change behavior. You change belief, because behavior follows belief, and belief shapes repetition. Now let's look at a simple example. Saving money. Most people treat it like a task, something they should do, something they try to do, something they do when they feel like it. But wealthy thinkers treat it differently. They see saving as part of who they are, not optional, not negotiable, just standard. And when something becomes part of your identity, it becomes automatic. That's the shift from effort to identity, because effort requires energy. Identity requires consistency, and consistency creates results. Now here's the challenge. Bad habits are easy. They're comfortable. They're immediate. They feel good now, but they cost you later. Good habits are harder. They require discipline. They delay reward. They feel uncomfortable at first, but they pay you later. And most people choose based on feeling, not outcome. That's why they stay stuck, because they optimize for now instead of later. But wealth is built by people who reverse that. They optimize for later, even when it's harder now. That's the mindset shift. From instant gratification to delayed gratification. And that's not just about money, it's about life. Because every area of growth follows the same pattern. Short-term discomfort for long-term gain. Now imagine this. If you improve just one financial habit, and stayed consistent for a year, what would change? Maybe you save a small percentage regularly. Maybe you track your spending. Maybe you invest consistently. Maybe you stop one unnecessary expense. It doesn't sound life-changing, but over time, it becomes exactly that. Because habits don't just change your results, they change your trajectory, and trajectory determines your future. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Success is not what you do once. It's what you do every day without thinking. And that's what habits are. Repeated decisions. Automated, quiet, powerful. So the question is, what are your habits building? Because whether you realize it or not, they are building something every single day. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that amplifies habits, something that accelerates growth or multiplies mistakes, something that determines how fast your financial life changes, compounding, and why understanding it might be the difference between struggle and freedom. Chapter 10. Compounding is quiet until it isn't. At first it feels slow, almost pointless. You invest a little, you save a little, you improve a little, and nothing dramatic happens. No breakthrough, no explosion of results, no visible transformation, just small progress. So small that most people stop. They lose patience. They lose focus. They go back to chasing quick wins. Because compounding doesn't impress you in the beginning. It tests you. It asks one question. Can you stay consistent without immediate reward? And most people can't. Because we're wired for instant feedback. We want to see results now. We want to feel progress now. We want confirmation that what we're doing is working. But compounding doesn't work that way. It works in silence. It builds slowly, unnoticed, uncelebrated, until one day, it doesn't. Until one day, everything starts to accelerate, and suddenly, what felt small becomes massive. What felt insignificant becomes life-changing. But by then, it's too late for most people because they already quit. This is the power of compounding, and also the reason so many people never experience it. Now let's break it down simply. Compounding is when your results start producing more results. Your money generates more money. Your skills create more opportunities. Your habits strengthen themselves. It's growth on top of growth. And the longer it runs, the faster it grows. But here's the part most people miss. Compounding doesn't just work for you. It works against you too. Bad habits compound. Debt compounds. Missed opportunities compound. Delays compound. Every day you wait, you're not just staying still. You're falling behind because time keeps moving. And compounding keeps working, whether you participate or not. Now think about this. Two people start at the same point. Same income, same opportunities, same environment. One person saves and invests consistently. The other delays, spends, waits for the right time. At first, there's no difference, maybe even the opposite. The spender seems happier, more relaxed, more free, but over time, the gap grows slowly, then faster, then dramatically, until one day, it's undeniable, and by then, it's very hard to catch up. That's compounding. It doesn't reward intensity, it rewards consistency. Now here's where mindset matters again. Because if your thinking is short-term, you will never stay in the game long enough to benefit. You'll quit too early. You'll change direction too often. You'll chase faster results. And in doing that, you reset your progress again and again and again. But if your thinking is long-term, you stay consistent. You trust the process. You understand that slow growth is still growth, and eventually it becomes fast growth. This is why patience is one of the highest paid traits in the world. Not because it feels good, but because it allows compounding to work. And most people don't have it. They want results now. They want certainty now. They want proof now. But wealth doesn't move that way. It builds quietly, in the background, until one day it shows up. Now, here's a line I want you to remember. Compounding is invisible until it becomes unstoppable. And when it becomes unstoppable, it changes everything. Your income, your options, your freedom, your life. But only if you stay in the game, only if you don't quit, only if you trust the process when nothing seems to be happening. Now imagine this. What if you committed to consistency for the next 5 years? Not perfection, just consistency. Investing regularly, improving daily, making intentional decisions, avoiding unnecessary risks. Staying focused 5 years. That's it. Your entire life would shift because compounding would take over, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. But here's the catch. You have to start, and you have to continue, even when it's boring, even when it's slow, even when nobody notices, because that's where the real work happens. Now this leads us to something even more powerful, because compounding doesn't just apply to money, it applies to thinking, to behavior, to identity. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore how your environment quietly shapes all of it, and why who you surround yourself with might be influencing your wealth more than you realize. Chapter 11. Your environment is programming you. Right now. Silently. Constantly. Whether you realize it or not. The people you talk to. The content you consume. The conversations you listen to. The habits you observe. The standards you're surrounded by. All of it is shaping how you think. And how you think shapes how you handle money. This is one of the most overlooked forces in wealth psychology because it doesn't feel obvious, it doesn't feel direct, but it's always there, influencing your decisions, your beliefs, your expectations. Now think about this. If everyone around you spends impulsively, what feels normal? If everyone around you avoids investing, what feels risky? If everyone around you complains about money, what feels inevitable? You don't just hear these patterns, you absorb them. And over time, they become your default. Not because they're right, but because they're familiar. And familiarity feels like truth. This is why environment matters so much, because it sets your standard, and your standard determines your behavior. If your environment expects little, you do little. If your environment tolerates chaos, you accept chaos. If your environment avoids growth, you avoid growth. Not consciously, but automatically. And that's the danger, because you don't question what feels normal. You follow it. Now here's the shift. Wealthy thinkers don't just change their actions. They change their environment. They become intentional about what they allow around them, what they listen to, what they engage with, what they repeat, because they understand something powerful. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your environment. And if your environment is not aligned with where you want to go, it will pull you back every time. Now, this doesn't mean you need to cut everyone off. It doesn't mean you need to isolate yourself. It means you need awareness, clarity, intentional exposure. Because in today's world, your environment is not just physical, it's digital. What you watch, what you read, what you scroll, what you listen to daily, that shapes your thinking just as much, if not more, than the people around you. And most people don't control it. They let algorithms decide. They consume randomly. They absorb noise, and then wonder why their thinking feels scattered, why their focus feels weak, why their progress feels slow. Because your input determines your output every time. Now imagine this. If you surrounded yourself with people who think long-term, who value discipline, who understand money, who focus on growth, what would happen? Your standards would rise, your habits would shift, your decisions would improve, not because you forced it, but because it became normal. That's the power of environment. It makes the right behavior easier and the wrong behavior uncomfortable. Now here's the challenge. Changing your environment is uncomfortable because it often means outgrowing what feels familiar. It means saying no to certain influences. It means being intentional when others are passive. It means standing alone sometimes. And that's difficult because humans crave belonging. But here's the truth. If you belong to the wrong environment, you lose yourself. And if you lose yourself, you lose your direction, your discipline, your future. So you have to choose comfort or growth, familiarity or progress, because you can't have both at the same level. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Your environment whispers your future every single day. The question is, what is it saying? Because in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something that connects everything we've discussed so far. Your identity, who you believe you are, and why that belief is the foundation of your financial life. Chapter 12. Identity is the root of everything. Not your income, not your skills, not your opportunities. Your identity, who you believe you are, is the foundation of every financial decision you make. Because you don't act randomly, you act in alignment with your self-image. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, you will unconsciously make decisions that confirm it. If you see yourself as someone who is disciplined, you will naturally behave that way. If you see yourself as someone who just isn't good with finances, you will avoid learning, avoid responsibility, avoid growth, not because you're incapable, but because your identity doesn't support it. And here's the truth, most people never confront. You don't get what you want. You get what you believe you are. That's why change feels hard. Not because the actions are impossible, but because they conflict with your identity. You try to save money, but deep down, you believe you're not consistent. You try to invest, but deep down, you believe you're not knowledgeable. You try to grow, but deep down, you believe you're not capable. So what happens? You start, you hesitate, you stop, and then you confirm the belief. I knew this wasn't for me, but it's not the truth. It's a pattern, a loop, and it keeps repeating until you change the identity. Now here's where it gets powerful. Identity is not fixed. It's built through repetition, through evidence, through the stories you tell yourself, based on what you do. That means you can change it, but not by thinking differently alone, by acting differently, consistently, because every action you take sends a message to your brain. This is who I am. When you save money, even a small amount, you reinforce the identity of someone who manages money. When you invest, even imperfectly, you reinforce the identity of someone who builds wealth. When you learn, when you focus, when you follow through, you reshape how you see yourself. And over time, that identity becomes stronger than your old one. Now here's the shift. Stop focusing on what you want. Start focusing on who you need to become. Not, I want more money, but I am someone who builds wealth. Not, I need to be more disciplined, but I am someone who follows through. Not, I hope I can change, but I am changing through what I do daily. Because identity is not declared. It's demonstrated quietly, repeatedly, over time. And the more evidence you build, the more natural it becomes. Now this connects directly to something your competitors emphasize in different ways. The idea that mindset and internal belief systems drive external results long before money shows up in reality. But here's where most people get stuck. They wait to feel like the person first. They wait for confidence. They wait for certainty. They wait for proof. But it doesn't work that way. Confidence comes after action. Clarity comes after movement. Identity comes after repetition, not before. So if you're waiting to feel ready, you'll stay the same. But if you start acting, even imperfectly, even inconsistently at first, you begin to shift. And that shift changes everything. Because once your identity changes, your decisions follow automatically. You don't force discipline, you embody it. You don't chase growth, you become someone who grows. You don't struggle with money, you manage it naturally. That's the real transformation, not external, internal. Now here's a line I want you to remember. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. And if your identity is not aligned with your goals, you will always fall short. So the real question is, who are you becoming? Not who you were, not who you think you are, but who you are choosing to become through your actions today. Because in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something that quietly influences your identity, your decisions, and your entire financial path. Comparison, and why measuring yourself against others might be one of the most expensive habits you have. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video. Chapter 13. Comparison is a trap. Disguised as motivation, it starts quietly. You see someone doing better, earning more, living differently, moving faster. And at first, it feels like inspiration, like a push, like something that should motivate you. But then something shifts. You start measuring your progress against theirs, your timeline against theirs, your results against theirs. And suddenly, what you have doesn't feel like enough. What you've done doesn't feel like progress. And what you're building feels too slow, That's the trap. Because comparison doesn't just distort reality. It destroys clarity. You stop focusing on your path and start reacting to someone else's. Now here's the truth. You are not seeing the full picture. You're seeing highlights, outcomes, moments, not the process, not the failures, not the timing, not the luck, not the years of invisible work, just the result. And when you compare your reality to someone else's highlight, you will always feel behind, even when you're moving forward. Now think about this. Two people, different backgrounds, different opportunities, different timing, different risks, different environments, different goals, and yet we compare them as if they're the same. That doesn't make sense, but it's what most people do. And it creates pressure, unnecessary pressure to move faster, to earn more, to prove something, to keep up. But here's the problem. When you chase someone else's pace, you lose your own direction. You start making decisions, not based on what's right for you, but based on what looks right from the outside. And that leads to mistakes, rushed investments, unnecessary spending, emotional decisions, risk without understanding. Because you're not acting from clarity, you're reacting from comparison. Now here's where it gets deeper. Comparison doesn't just affect your decisions. It affects your identity. You start questioning yourself, your abilities, your progress, your worth, and that weakens your confidence, which weakens your discipline, which weakens your consistency. And suddenly, you're not just behind, you're stuck. All because you were measuring yourself against the wrong reference. Now here's the shift. Stop comparing outcomes. Start understanding process. Because process is what you can control. Outcomes are influenced by too many variables: luck, timing, circumstances, opportunity. But process, that's yours. Your habits, your discipline, your thinking, your consistency. That's what builds your future, not someone else's timeline. Now let me ask you something honestly. If nobody else existed, no social media, no comparisons, no external pressure, what would you focus on? What would you build? What would matter? That answer is your real path. But most people never find it because they're too busy watching others. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Comparison makes you chase. Clarity makes you build. And chasing is exhausting. It never ends. There's always someone ahead, always someone doing more, always someone moving faster. But building is different. It's intentional, it's focused, it's aligned, and it creates something real, something sustainable, something yours. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore others completely. You can learn, you can observe, you can be inspired, but you don't measure your worth by their results, because your journey is not supposed to look like theirs. And that's not a weakness. That's an advantage, because it means you're not competing, you're creating. Now this leads us to something even more important. Because once you stop comparing, once you start focusing on your path, you need something to guide you, something to keep you aligned, something to give your actions meaning. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore exactly that. Vision, and why without it, even the right actions can lead you in the wrong direction. Chapter 14. Vision is the anchor. Without it, you drift, you work, you stay busy, you make money, you spend money, you repeat. But you don't move forward, not in a meaningful way, because movement without direction is just motion, and motion is not progress. Now think about this. Why do some people stay consistent even when things are hard? Why do some people stay disciplined even when results are slow? Why do some people build wealth while others stay stuck? It's not just habits. It's not just discipline. It's vision, a clear understanding of where they're going and why it matters. Because when you have vision, your actions have purpose. Your sacrifices make sense. Your patience becomes easier. But without vision, everything feels random, pointless, temporary. You save money, but don't know why. You work harder, but don't know for what. You try to improve, but feel disconnected. And eventually, you lose motivation because there's no direction holding it all together. Now here's the truth. Most people don't lack effort. They lack clarity. They don't know what financial freedom actually means to them. They don't know what they're building. They don't know what enough looks like. So they default to what they see. More money, more status, more things. But that's not vision. That's imitation. And imitation leads to empty success. You achieve something, but it doesn't feel right because it was never truly yours. Now, here's where it gets powerful. Vision is not about numbers. It's about life. What kind of life do you want to live? How do you want to spend your time? What matters to you? Freedom, security, flexibility, impact, peace. Because money is just a tool. It amplifies your life, but it doesn't define it. And if you don't know what life you want, you will misuse the tool. Now imagine this. You wake up every day knowing exactly what you're building. Every decision connects to something bigger. Every action moves you forward. Every sacrifice feels intentional. That's vision. And when you have it, you don't need constant motivation because direction replaces it. Now let's make this practical. Ask yourself 3 questions. What does financial freedom look like for me? Not society, not social media. You? What would my ideal day look like? How would I spend my time? Who would I be with? What would I focus on? And why does it matter? What is the deeper reason behind it? Security, freedom, control, peace? Because when your why is clear, your how becomes easier. Now here's the challenge. Clarity takes time. It takes honesty. It takes reflection. And most people avoid that. They stay busy instead because thinking deeply feels uncomfortable. But without that clarity, you're building blindly, and blind building leads to frustration. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Without vision, money becomes noise. You earn it, you spend it, you chase it. But it doesn't mean anything because it's not connected to something real. But with vision, money becomes a tool, a resource, a way to build a life you actually want. Now here's where it connects to everything we've discussed. Vision shapes your identity. It guides your habits. It strengthens your discipline. It filters your environment. It protects you from comparison. It keeps you focused on what matters. That's why it's so powerful, because it aligns everything. Now imagine building wealth. Without vision, you might succeed financially, but feel empty, lost, disconnected, because you reached a destination you never defined. But when you build with vision, every step matters, every decision aligns, every result feels meaningful. Now this leads us to something even more critical, because even with vision, even with discipline, even with clarity, there's still something that can quietly destroy progress, something subtle, something emotional, something that shows up when things start going well, comfort. And in the next chapter, we're going to confront it, because comfort is one of the biggest threats to long-term wealth. Chapter 15, comfort is a beautiful trap. It feels good. It feels safe. It feels like you've earned it. You've worked hard. You've made progress. Things are finally stable, predictable, controlled, and for a moment, it feels like you've arrived. But here's the truth most people don't realize. Comfort doesn't stop your growth. It slowly replaces it. Because growth requires tension. It requires challenge. It requires movement into the unknown. And comfort removes all of that. Now, this doesn't happen suddenly. It happens gradually. You start relaxing your standards just a little. You stop pushing as hard just a little. You delay things more often just a little. And those small shifts turn into patterns. And those patterns turn into stagnation. Now here's where it becomes dangerous. Because comfort doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like success. It feels like stability. It feels like you're doing well. And that's why so many people stay stuck there for years, sometimes decades, because they confuse maintaining with growing. Now think about this. How many people do you know who reached a certain level and then stopped evolving? They're not struggling, but they're not progressing. They're comfortable, and comfort becomes their ceiling. Now connect this to money. When you first start building, you're focused, disciplined, intentional. You watch your spending. You think long-term. You make careful decisions. But once things improve, once income increases, once pressure decreases, you relax. You spend more freely. You stop tracking. You stop learning. You stop questioning. Because it feels like you've made it. But you haven't. You've just reached a new level, and if you stop growing there, that level becomes your limit. This is why many people earn more, but don't build more, because their lifestyle expands at the same pace as their income, sometimes faster, and suddenly they're back where they started, just at a higher level, more money, same patterns, same habits, same outcomes. That's the trap. Now here's the shift. Wealthy thinkers don't avoid comfort. They control it, they enjoy it, but they don't depend on it. They don't let it weaken their discipline. They don't let it lower their standards. They don't let it replace their focus, because they understand something powerful. The moment you get comfortable, you stop becoming, and becoming is the entire game. Now, this doesn't mean you should never rest. It doesn't mean you should always push. It means you should stay aware of when comfort is helping you recover and when it's causing you to settle. Because there's a difference. Rest is intentional. Comfort is passive. Rest prepares you for growth. Comfort delays it. And if you stay in comfort too long, you forget what growth feels like. You lose your edge. Your discipline weakens. Your urgency disappears. And slowly, without realizing it, you drift. Now imagine this. What would happen if every time you felt comfortable, you asked yourself one question? What am I avoiding right now? Because comfort often hides avoidance. Avoiding growth, avoiding challenge, avoiding change. And once you see that, you can act, you can move, you can push forward again. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Comfort will keep you stable, but it will never move you forward. And stability without growth eventually becomes decline, because the world keeps moving, markets change, opportunities shift, standards rise, and if you're standing still, you're falling behind. Now this leads us to something even more critical, because even when you're growing, even when you're disciplined, even when you're focused, there's still something that can destroy everything, something that builds slowly, then hits all at once, overconfidence. And in the next chapter, we're going to break it down because the same mindset that builds wealth, if unchecked, can also lose it. Chapter 16. Overconfidence is silent until it costs you. It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels powerful. It feels like clarity, like certainty, like control. You start making better decisions. You start seeing results. You start gaining momentum. And slowly, without realizing it, your mindset shifts from careful to certain, from aware to convinced, from disciplined to relaxed. That's where overconfidence begins, not in failure, in success. Because success creates belief, and belief, if unchecked, turns into assumption. Now here's the truth most people don't expect. The same confidence that builds wealth can destroy it. Because confidence makes you act. But overconfidence makes you stop thinking. And when you stop thinking, you stop questioning. You stop analyzing. You stop preparing. You start assuming. Assuming you're right. Assuming you understand. Assuming you can't lose. And that's when mistakes happen, not small ones. Big ones. Because overconfidence doesn't just affect decisions. It amplifies them. You take bigger risks. You ignore warning signs. You double down on bad ideas. You move faster than your understanding. And when it works, it reinforces the belief. I know what I'm doing. But when it doesn't, the cost is heavy. Now let's connect this to money. Imagine someone who invests and sees early success. They grow their money. They feel smart, capable, in control. So they take bigger risks, less research, more confidence, and for a while, it works. But then, one decision goes wrong, and because the risk is higher, the loss is bigger, and suddenly, everything changes, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lost awareness. That's the danger of overconfidence. It removes the very caution that created success in the first place. Now here's where it gets deeper. Overconfidence doesn't just come from success. It comes from repetition. Doing something long enough without failure creates the illusion of mastery. But repetition is not mastery. It's familiarity. And familiarity can be misleading because it makes things feel easier without necessarily making them safer. Now think about your own decisions. Where do you feel most certain? Where do you feel like you know enough? Where do you stop questioning? Because that's where you're most vulnerable, not where you're unsure, where you're convinced. Now here's the shift. Wealthy thinkers don't eliminate confidence. They balance it with humility, with awareness, with constant learning. They understand that no matter how much they know, there's always more they don't. They stay curious. They stay cautious. They stay grounded because they know something powerful. The moment you think you've figured it out is the moment you stop growing. And when you stop growing, you start declining. Now, this doesn't mean you doubt yourself constantly. It means you stay open to new information, to new perspectives, to correction, because correction is what protects you. Now imagine this. Every time you feel certain, you pause and ask, what could I be missing? What am I not seeing? What if I'm wrong? Not from fear, but from awareness. That one habit can save you from massive mistakes because it keeps you thinking, keeps you grounded, keeps you sharp. Now here's a line I want you to remember. Confidence builds your path. Humility keeps you on it. Without confidence, you don't act. Without humility, you don't last, and wealth requires both. Now this leads us to something even more important, because even with awareness, even with discipline, Even with the right mindset, there's still something that determines whether you succeed long-term or fall apart under pressure. Resilience. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore it. Because building wealth is not just about making the right decisions. It's about surviving the wrong ones. Chapter 17. Resilience is what keeps you in the game. Because no matter how smart you are, no matter how disciplined you become, no matter how well you plan, you will make mistakes. You will lose money. You will miss opportunities. You will get things wrong. That's not a possibility. That's a guarantee. And this is where most people break. Not when things are hard, but when things don't go as expected, because they assume that progress should be smooth, logical, predictable. But wealth doesn't work that way. It's messy, uncertain, uncomfortable, and if you're not prepared for that, you won't last. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Success is not about avoiding failure, it's about surviving it. Because failure is part of the process, not a sign that you're doing something wrong, but a sign that you're doing something real. Now think about this. Two people make a mistake. Both lose money. Both face the same situation. One stops, pulls back, becomes afraid, avoids risk, avoids growth. The other learns, adjusts, moves forward, same event, different response, different future. That's resilience, not avoiding problems, but responding to them differently. Now here's where it gets deeper. Resilience is not just about bouncing back. It's about staying stable while things are uncertain. Because the most dangerous moment is not failure. It's emotional reaction, panic, frustration, doubt. Those emotions push people into bad decisions, selling too early, quitting too soon, changing direction impulsively, and those decisions often cause more damage than the original mistake. This idea connects directly with something seen in competitive content. That emotional control under pressure determines whether you stay consistent or collapse. Now, imagine this. Something doesn't go as planned. Instead of reacting, you pause. You think. You ask, what can I learn from this? What can I adjust? What do I do next? That shift, from reaction to response, is everything because it keeps you in control. Now here's the key. Resilience is built before you need it, not during, through habits, through discipline, through mindset, through small challenges that prepare you for bigger ones. Because when pressure hits, you don't rise to your expectations. You fall to your preparation. And if you've never trained your mind, you will react emotionally. But if you've built discipline, clarity, awareness, you stay steady. Now let's connect this to money again. Markets go up, markets go down. Opportunities appear, opportunities disappear. Nothing stays the same. And if your mindset depends on stability, you will struggle because instability is part of the system. But if your mindset is resilient, you adapt, you stay consistent, you keep moving, and over time, that consistency wins. Not because you avoided mistakes, but because you didn't let them stop you. Now here's a powerful shift. Stop asking, how do I avoid failure? Start asking, how do I handle it when it happens? Because that's the real skill, not perfection, recovery. Now here's a line I want you to remember. You don't lose when you fail, you lose when you stop. Failure is temporary. Stopping is permanent. And most people stop long before they reach their potential. Not because they couldn't succeed, but because they couldn't handle the process. Now imagine this. If you knew with absolute certainty that you would succeed eventually, but only if you didn't quit, how would you act? Would you stop after one mistake, after one loss, after one setback? No. You would continue calmly, confidently, patiently. That's resilience, acting as if success is inevitable, as long as you keep going. Now, this leads us to something even more important, because resilience keeps you in the game. Now, think about this. If you continue exactly as you are, same habits, same thinking, same decisions, where will you be in 5 years? Now, imagine you shift just slightly. Better decisions, better focus, better discipline. Where will you be then? That gap is your opportunity. And it starts with one decision, right now. Now, here's the final truth. Wealth is not built in moments of motivation. It's built in moments of decision. Quiet decisions, daily decisions, the ones nobody sees, the ones that feel small, the ones that seem insignificant. But over time, they create everything. Now, this is where you make it personal, not theoretical, not motivational, real. What will you do? After this, not what you hope, not what you plan, what you will actually do. Because that answer is your future. Now, before we close, let's make this moment count. If something in this journey resonated with you, if something shifted your thinking, if something made you pause and reflect, don't let it fade. Lock it in. Make a commitment, not to me, to yourself, a quiet contract, that you will take action, that you will think differently, that you will stop repeating patterns that don't serve you. And if this message reached you, share it with someone who needs it. Because most people are not lacking effort. They're lacking awareness. And awareness changes everything. And if you're ready to go deeper, to stay consistent, to build this mindset daily, then subscribe, not for content, but for accountability, because consistency is easier when you're reminded. Now take one last moment, reflect, breathe, and decide. Because this is not the end, it's the beginning, and your future is waiting on your next move. Make it count.